For family offices, increasing allocations to alternatives also comes with more tedious tasks required to manage portfolios. Are these manual operational workflows slowing you down? This episode of the AYU Family Office podcast is brought to you by Canoe Intelligence. Born within a family office, Canoe uses AI and machine learning to automate manual workflows and transform how you manage your alternative investment data. Automate your document collection and data extraction process to turn tedious tasks into your strategic advantage, delivering precise outcomes and actionable insights to manage your alts smarter with Canoe. Over 200 family offices utilize Canoe to help improve efficiencies, scale their alts, portfolios, and future-proof the family office. Find out how in the podcast description or visit canoeintelligence.com/AYU.
Hello, welcome back to the Family Office podcast. This week, really interesting conversation. Family Office, super specific focused. Everett Kamin, two family office hats on, deep history in healthcare. And one of our, it's a long run member, but one of our most focused investment theses across all our members, I think.
Not only does he have extensive experience in the family office space, you know, the being in the healthcare industry itself for 30 years. And, you know, topics before that we've discussed is, you know, the mushroom effect. Sometimes working in a family office, you become, you know, you don't become specialist, your kind of outlook becomes broadened and widened over time. It feels like he is maintaining that specialism and not getting even more
laser focus.
Clear cut.
I mean, when we're dipping into to questions about what else you're interested in, you know, this is most family offices will be, you know, relatively open and we'll explore things, and it came back to, you know, real focus. So fascinating conversation, this one. Let's get into it, Liz.
Let's do it. Hey Everett, how is it going? Thank you for joining us on the AU Family Office podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again, Lucy. Good to see you again, Gus.
Welcome.
So I think it would be great for you to just introduce yourself, give like a high-level overview of what you're working on now and what you do in the family office space.
Sure. I'm a healthcare investment director at Gemini Capital Partners and chief investment officer at Silverstein Family Office Dream Foundation. And I wear all various other hats at different family office associations, charities, and portfolio companies that we have.
But those two main two, so you're double-hatted two family offices.
Yes, there is an overlapping strategy because we are an evergreen strategy. There is no IRR, DPI, or anything to that event. So we can work symbiotically, and we look at diabetes, which is the Silverstein focus, at Gemini as well. So we get to share a lot of those learnings, resources, and best practices.
Okay, that's great. And we will dive in more into that about what you do in healthcare investing and for these family offices. But I think for our listeners, what would be great is to get an understanding of your background. How did you get from, you know, start of the career journey to working in family offices and notably specializing in healthcare investing?
Yeah, it's not really a linear journey for anybody, I don't think.
Never is.
No, so I started my career like most people at large investment banks. It was nearly 30 years ago. Funny enough, in Japan, Korea, and the US, with the likes of Goldman, Merrill, B of A, Wells Fargo, did healthcare investment banking, then moved over to private equity investment banking. But this is prior to GFC and Wagner rules. So banks were allowed to take principal stakes in companies. So we were in effect buy-side investment directors. Loved that until the financial crisis. And then, you know, those groups became, I would say, deminimized in terms of their responsibilities. So prior to that ending, I moved over to a sovereign wealth fund in Eastern Europe. And it was a healthcare roll-up strategy. And it was supposed to be for 6 months, but like all good stories, 6 months became 10 years. And in that 10-year period of time, I lived and worked in 30 different countries doing healthcare roll-ups. That sovereign wealth fund spun out a private equity vehicle, and that private equity vehicle spun out a family office. And basically, that's how I got involved in the family office world. The chief investment officer took me wherever he went. So I ran with that family office until about 2019, contacted some of my relationships from Japan and Korea nearly 20 years ago. And now they were part of a family office that specifically focused on healthcare, which is what I specialized in. And they were basically asking if I could build their healthcare family office the way I did from 0 to 100 for the previous. So I said yes. And that's where I am now, Gemini Capital Partners.
And how did the other family office kind of come along parallel to Gemini?
Which one? Silverstein or?
Silverstein.
Yes. Okay. So because I wear multiple hats, Gemini has let's say, a twofold strategy. We have a buyout strategy, which focuses mostly on healthcare services. So think more generic drug manufacturing facilities, CDMOs, medical device distribution companies, not clinics and such. And then we do a minority stake investments, which are like digital health, medical devices, diabetes, oncology, cardiovascular, women's health, mental health, that kind of stuff. Because we were doing more of the minority side in diabetes, and I'm also on the advisory board for Macmillan Cancer, which you may well know is a 100-plus-year-old charity in the UK, which invests in early stage oncology investments. Because of my work with Macmillan, the family office connection, and being known within the family office world as one of the healthcare, I'd say, ambassadors, the Silverstein family approached me to help them build out their diabetes strategy and their Silverstein Dream Foundation Fund. So that's how I became the chief investment officer of that fund. And we are now building that from 0 to 100 and defining that strategy as well in early stage diabetes technologies and biotech and therapeutics.
So is there anything else that you look at in terms of that sort of sector? And how do you go about, I guess, doing the DD and sourcing these deals, and what interests you? Is this you building that out? I mean, it sounds like it is. Or is this direction from the family office's own motivations and passions themselves?
Well, look, I think all of us have been touched by one debilitating disease or another. I lost most of my family from cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Gemini Capital Partners, the principals themselves, there's some neurodegenerative disorders that they have a passion for, and that's one of the reasons why they got into the generic drug manufacturing facilities business. The Silverstein family is deeply rooted in some of their members being affected by diabetes, and that's how that thesis was born. In terms of how we do due diligence and whatnot, it's not one for all. It's different. Healthcare is the biggest, in my belief, the sector that in the world, in that it's everything from a small molecule to a building with elderly people in it and everything in between. So for those who say they know everything about healthcare, they're, embellishing quite a bit. So when it comes to what we look at, we play to our strengths at Gemini, which is the healthcare services and the early stage medtech digital health. So we have backgrounds in that. With Silverstein, because we're taking a more robust approach where we're looking at biotech and therapeutics, as well as devices and digital, we're pulling in relationships from the top 5 diabetes funds in the world. And basically, I've been fortunate enough to forge certain relationships with those funds so that we can have a co-investment strategy with them on some of their greatest high conviction assets, and that we can be a dedicated funding partner and cap table member for some of the assets that they're deploying into. And the difference between, I would say, Gemini and Silverstein is that Silverstein is a 501(c) charity fund. So that is, it's patient capital, it's an evergreen structure, but it's a charity. So any liquidity events and whatnot just goes right back into the strategy itself. And it's less about IRR and DPI and MOIC. It's more about KPIs like number of years lived post-diagnosis and number of years detected prior to current pathways, and thresholds of pain reduced by a factor of 5x for certain kind of treatments and therapies. So these are some of the impact metrics we look at that are different than, let's say, Gemini, that's just more IRR focused or MOIC focused. So there is a little bit of a different strategy, a little bit of a different due diligence, and there is a little bit of different motivation to how we got into each thesis. So it was 3 questions, 3 answers.
No, that was brilliant. I think it's what would be interesting as well, and you've kind of touched on this, is this sort of, what it sounds like is this impact focus, right? And this is the philanthropy that weaves into what sounds like the motivations of a lot of these sort of family offices that you're working with in regards to the healthcare sector. So talk to me a little bit more about that. What does that mean for legacy? What does that mean for these family offices? Why is this healthcare an integral point for philanthropic motivations?
I mean, look, investing in traditional investments, you're looking for a return on investment for the capital that you're deploying. This is a chance for families to invest in things where the return on investment is far greater than just the IRR and MOIC. It's a return on the outcomes for those within the family and those within the family that they love and care for. So a lot of these technologies and therapies can be used and leveraged for, their own families and their own relationships, and that they can be educated in what is available. And that's why I got into healthcare, so that I didn't have a myopic view of the world via the US and the FDA. I have a robust knowledge database of understanding of what's going on in Europe and what's going on in Asia, what the best therapies and the best advancements are. And I would say that, right now we are at the precipice of great change. And that's why, a lot of people really need to understand this. The technologies that we are investing in now, if they were around when my family was around, they would still be around. And now those technologies that we're part of and that we're deploying, our family offices and our family offices' friends and the people that we educate and we affect with those investments, those families can still be around. And then continuous generations and further on. And it's no longer fiction. You're seeing real life things come to market far quicker than ever before. And it's highly impactful. It's not just, as I said, return on investment and MOIC.
The other family offices you're working with on these things, and I'm assuming this is lots of office collaboration. Well, can you characterize the split between ROI and impact of those guys? I mean, is the impact more important to people? Maybe you're attracting those people where the impact is more important, but obviously both together.
It's look, we have fiduciary hats and we have to wear them. When it comes to the non-charitable vehicles, we have to be benchmarked to, other people within our industry. Even if we're not a defined fund with a return period, we do measure ourselves mark to market. We make sure that we're, acting in a competitive, way in terms of where we're investing, and we look at those investments. But if you're in a charity, let's say you're a Macmillan or you're a Silverstein family office, those are the relationships that are really looking for impact, because it's the number of lives affected, not the number of dollars affected or pounds, whatever you want to quantify. So those circles tend to move together, whereas you have a lot of family offices that will give to these charities because it's not just a blind charitable pool of capital. They see their actual investments going into specific assets that are affecting the outcomes for people they know. So that those circles tend to move together. Macmillan for cancer and Silverstein for diabetes.
For those family offices who haven't yet, let's say, some who aren't looking at healthcare, or it's not maybe their priority, right? Let's say, or one of their investment focuses. What would be from you, who's building out this sort of infrastructure or investing strategy within these family offices? Where would you start? Are they best looking at funds? Are they best going to specialists? Are they best to go to co-investment with other family offices who are, kind of expertise in this field? Where do you start, I guess, for those who are interested or would be looking at this field?
Yeah, as I touched on before, it is the largest sector, so it is a lot to wrap your arms around. And it's clearly one of the, I'm sure that you've heard from some of your contemporaries that, healthcare is the one sector we don't play in because we don't understand it or we don't have the specificity of it. It is daunting to approach from zero, but there are ways to do it. I've built it out for 3 family offices and 2 funds, and it certainly can be done. It just depends on how long your time horizon is and where you want to focus, and if you might have an adjacent core capacity prior. So for instance, at Gemini, we had a manufacturing background and we had some that were adjacent to healthcare. And then we took those best practices and we started to deploy those into, let's say, medical device and distribution, which is more like disposables in hospitals, mask boots, gloves. Then we went adjacent and we had generic drug manufacturing facilities. And then you build upon that core skill set and you can, build out a strategy in that one area, which relative skill sets. And I think healthcare, you're starting to see a Venn diagram in a lot of areas, telemedicine, telecom, health, right? Even payors with like fintech, you're seeing insurance providers and whatnot, get onto the place. So it depends on where you're already playing. You might have an adjacency that you don't even realize that you can build off of. That's one way if you want to go direct and build yourself. Of course, the easier way is to build with funds. And if you want to build a long-term strategy where you're doing a co-investment and then eventually doing your own team, I always tell every family office that I work with, talk to, co-invest with, it's going to be a 5 to 10 year journey. What you want to do is you want to build best of breed, fund families that you can leverage off of, that you build, knowledge share, that you have consistent calls, you negotiate certain off takes with, whether it's the co-investment rights or the information rights. And you're slowly going to build out that core capacity where you're going to be picking the assets you want to be co-investing in their sidecars. And then you're going to be investing yourself because you know how to invest in those assets. And then slowly but surely, 5 to 10 years later, you have your own healthcare and team on the assets you've become smart of and the core competencies you built around. And that's the two ways to do it if you want to do directs. Of course, you can just do funds, and you can pick a portfolio of the best biotech funds, healthcare services funds, VC funds, and that's the other way. And you can do that in a passive way. But if you want to be an active investor and get involved in healthcare in a very specific way for a specific indication, let's say it's oncology, you can do directs if you end up doing the aforementioned way I said in the beginning.
With when you're working on the direct side of things, and looking for those co-investors and collaborators, family office co-investors and collaborators, how do you go about navigating that space in a very opaque world? And obviously, this is something we talk about constantly. Our approved family office program, the fake family offices. We know there are plenty of people out there. What are the big signifiers to you? What are the big flags early on that this is real, this isn't real? I guess with something like this, the level of expertise, especially in healthcare, there's a deep moat and a high
Yes.
wall. So it's relatively easy to navigate that stuff for you specifically?
Look, I've been in the family office world for 15 years, so perhaps I might have a little bit of a leg up on some of my contemporaries. But I feel like, and you can agree or disagree with this, it is a small world. So, and especially the family office world within healthcare is an even smaller one. So, where we see a lot of great opportunities is leveraging the skill sets of those family offices. Just how I said before, they play to their strengths. There are some family offices, I won't take liberty to say their names, but I'll tell you what they specialize in. And there are some that only do orthopedics, but they're the best in the business. And they've been doing it for 20 years, third generation, investing in only orthopedic companies in the US and Europe. And then there's some that just do drug discovery and, biotech and therapeutics. And there's some of the most astute biotech and therapeutics investors that may have started at investment banks and now they have multi-billion dollars under management that they're only investing in biotechs and therapeutics. And they themselves might not be clinicians, but they have the best relationships of those who can do diligence to technology. And, you want to build out a network of those family offices that specify in certain areas. Healthcare services, like I said, could be generic drug manufacturing facilities. It could be people that do biosimilars, which are essentially drugs that are almost like another one, but they're close enough where they don't have to be on the same patent. You can have people that are in the manufacturing process. It could be the blister packs. It could be the springs for the injectables for GLP-1. One of the biggest private equity deals last year was for a company like that. So there's a lot of places you can play in healthcare. You want to find the families that are good in each. And there are a plethora of them. Once you know a couple good, legitimate ones, you can find them online. Some of them are public, some of them are not. You build off of those relationships. And you covet them and you say, look, I'd love to get to be a consistent cap table investor with you. Is there anything you can open up that I can perhaps participate? You know how it is. You have your great network, Gus, and that I'm sure that once you've vetted people, you're happy to make kind introductions. And that speaks to a lot of the access points. So it's a long answer, but it's not essentially a direct.
Yeah, no, I'm always fascinated by that stuff, especially in such a specific market, because trust is everything.
Absolutely.
And you can only burn a bridge once, and it reverberates around the market very, very, very quickly. You mentioned, you were talking about direct versus funds. We're seeing a bit of a trend where family offices have been playing in the direct market. I'm not saying healthcare, I'm saying across the board, and realized that the specificity of funds and the expertise of funds actually helps them navigate things a lot easier. The question I've got is relative to family offices starting their own funds, and whether that is something you think is a good thing. Is it them, monetizing some expertise when they should be doing co-investment? How do you feel about regulated funds that start from a family office?
Yeah, look, this is a contentious question. I'm sure that's why you've asked it.
For family offices, increasing allocations to alternatives also comes with more tedious tasks required to manage portfolios. Are these manual operational workflows slowing you down? This episode of the AYU Family Office podcast is brought to you by Canoe Intelligence. Born within a family office, Canoe uses AI and machine learning to automate manual workflows and transform how you manage your alternative investment data. Automate your document collection and data extraction process to turn tedious tasks into your strategic advantage, delivering precise outcomes and actionable insights to manage your alts smarter with Canoe. Over 200 family offices utilize Canoe to help improve efficiencies, scale their alts, portfolios, and future-proof the family office. Find out how in the podcast description or visit canoeintelligence.com/AYU.
It is of the same practice where I said before, where somebody's trying to build a strategy out for themselves. The question is, like, do they have the agency and legitimacy to do that? Like, have they built a core competency in this space where they're generating enough alpha where they, I don't want to say deserve to start a fund, but their fund is going to be as good, if not better, than the current offerings that are on the street. That's what you should ask yourself: are they getting it from either, sourcing, selection, so they're better analysts, are they better sourcers, do they have better, negotiation terms because of the balance sheet they're behind? Like, what is the differentiator of why they're doing a fund versus somebody else? And if they start offering that as a product, it becomes a little bit of a dangerous slope, because then all of a sudden they are a family office but become a quasi-service provider. So where do they fall in the family office network when we have events? So, and then when it comes to co-investments, how do you allow everybody to have a co-investment in an asset that's in a portfolio? There's only certain amount of right of first refusal each cap table member has. So that's also another tricky situation. So it's not an easy answer, but that's probably why you asked the question. So we are seeing that trend, and there are quite a few of them out there now.
It is fraught. I mean, I'm most excited about the co-investment side, where a genuine family office looking for someone to come in on a deal, share expertise, maybe de-risk some of the cap table and go direct and not charging fees. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the certain things. There's lots of very, very good VCs that have come off the back of that, but it's a slightly uncomfortable evolution sometimes.
I prefer more that vehicle, and we have seen some family offices do that. And the model that I think will win will be the one where the family office is incentivized via the GP carry, and there is no management fee, because they have their own OPEX and management fees, but they're incentivized with the other family offices' outcomes. So if that company does well, the family office does well, the other family offices do well, great.
So they're not just gathering assets.
You're not just gathering assets, not another OPEX race for fee.
Got it. So I'm kind of continuing on that front, both direct and the fund side of things. How do you guys go? Let's do directs first. How do you guys go about sourcing? How are people contact? It's a very specialist area. So are they contacting you through professional channels? Is it cold outreach? Is it via network? What's the deal sourcing?
I wish I could say that it's one particular channel, but what I can tell you, which is the most effective channels, might be the better answer. So of course we get everything from the investment banks to the cold outreach to the VCs and the PEs and whatnot. The best deals that tend to be the ones that end up getting funded are either off-market deals where a company's not raising, but the family office that we know owns it or owns a majority stake and wants to not be lender of last resort for the cap table, as you said, diversify the cap table. And you are a trusted member and you get access to that deal. And you already know it's a great deal, so it's an access play. Those get funded, or you have a certain thesis and thematic that you want to build out. I can give you a perfect example of something that we're doing. We see great opportunity in generic drug manufacturing in Asia, not particularly India, because of the patent cliff that's coming. We think that there's going to be an undersupply of generic drug manufacturing facilities out there to service that patent cliff. So we are partnering with another family office to build out a facility in India that will have the highest of standards, the lowest of costs, but that will only supply Western nations. So we're going to ARB that. Because we know the other family offices in generic drug manufacturing facilities, it's a pull strategy. It's not push. So we're finding the other family office that want to do something with us, and we're doing this deal, buying a certain asset in a certain area that we've sourced. So that's a pull strategy because we know the family office. So it's not even a deal that came to us. We created the deal. So those are two areas where I think you get the most success is either you have a thematic that you want to build out or you want to invest in and you find the family offices who want to do it with you. And you basically can create the deal via assets you identify, or some of the best of breed, as I mentioned before, and you approach them for your participation that you want to play in maybe some of their assets or something that they're investing in. Those are the two most high success. And all of them, the one consistency, all off market. All off market. Everything else, anytime I see an investment bank in a deal, I have never been part of an investment bank deal.
Really? That puts you off to start with.
It's just the incentives are misaligned. The projections are generally gregarious. I mean, they're just boisterous. And the fees themselves are already eroding into the raise.
Can I just very quickly, can you just dive into patent cliff? Is that...
Yeah, I should explain that.
No, I can see where you're going, but what I'm interested in is there a correlation between lots of patents coming off that cliff at the same time?
Yes. So this all started during COVID because essentially we had all these clinical trials that were going on during COVID, and then when everything shut down, they had to stop. So when all of those trials had to stop and everybody restarted to finding a vaccine for COVID, all of that research for all of these drugs that were going to be, basically pharma has a pipeline. They're consistently building new drugs every year for the ones that are coming off. Things are coming off patent, things are going off patent. So they have a consistency where they have assets under management. What happened was during COVID, we lost all of that capacity for like 2 or 3 years. And we lost all of those trials that essentially had to end or be restarted because everybody was reprioritizing COVID. So now we have this gap period coming for when all of these patents are going to be coming off of cliff and that there's no new assets to fill the pipeline. So where is all the money going to be going? Is a massive amount of generics are going to hit the market. So everybody's going to be buying these essential biologics that are coming off of patent in generic form.
Okay. And this is happening soon?
Yes.
Wow, amazing. Okay. That was a side pocket question. But
It does deserve some explanation. So thank you for asking.
Well, we've talked about this throughout the sort of, you've expressed a lot of opportunity and trends that are going on in the space. I'd like to know from a family office perspective, I guess from where you're sitting, where are you seeing the most exciting developments in terms of region, but also sector? And I know that's a loaded question, but this is your opinion. Yeah, no, region is difficult. Commercialization will always be best of breed in the States. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's essentially where you're going to get the most growth, the scale. Even in healthcare, it's just where the spend is. In terms of earlier stage assets, you get some of the best science and research and early stage companies out of the UK and Europe because the multiples are lower and, there's some of the best institutions in the world. That's one of the reasons why I place myself here, because you're at the forefront of research and academics and whatnot. We have Cambridge, Imperial, Oxford. In terms of where I think things are the most excited, I've already kind of talked about healthcare services. What I can say is that with AI and automation, we are seeing massive improvements in even manufacturing process defects. 30% in the past year have been reduced just due to AI. So that's in the healthcare services sector. Drug discovery, traditional methods have been essentially versus AI. We are now discovering drugs and molecules 50% faster. Therapies, so CAR T cell therapies, where cancer treatments that used to be very expensive and very long lead times to create. Through different optimization and AI technologies, we're creating those at 1/5 of the time, at 1/5 of the cost. Imaging and diagnostics. A person might be able to accurately see something in radiology, CT scans, whatever it may be, at a 98% accuracy. Okay, so the AI might be able to do it at 99%, but that's someone doing it 98% when they're rested and at their best. What happens when they're on a 20-hour shift? Right? So these are the technologies, even if the improvement is only by 1%, you can do 1% consistently at the best that somebody can do when they're rested and at their best. So we like a lot of those things to reduce the burden, in the NHS where people are overworked and understaffed. And then better patient diagnosis, better patient outcomes, better patient results. Give you an example by a company that's backed by Sequoia called Open Evidence for GPs. There are every hour, I'd say 3 medical journals published
every hour. So what that means is that the best doctors in the world, whether they're 50 or 60 and have 30 years of experience and seen all these patients, they were trained off of medical journals and evidence and teachings of 30 years ago. There is no way that they've been able to keep up with 3 medical journals every hour for those 30 years. So what Open Evidence does is it essentially aggregates all those journals so that when they're looking at a patient, they can ask the right questions to this application that will source through all the medical journals to find out that person's genotype, the symptoms they're presenting, what might be the best biologic for them, what might be the best pathway for them. So again, you can have better patient results, better patient outcomes, better diagnoses. And then, there are amazing technologies out there that sound like science fiction, but they're real. A company called Histosonics that essentially liquefies tumors in soft tissue organs, FDA approved in liver. Jeff Bezos and a consortium of other people just bought the company. This is a company where you're in the operating theater and an hour and a half later, you're out with a non-invasive tumor removal. I mean, that's stuff that used to be of science fiction, but now it's real. So like I said, we're at the precipice of amazing advancements in healthcare. And that's why people need to start paying attention to this, because it's the education that will give them the democratization of healthcare where they could start choosing the best option for them, not just what their GP recommends.
It sounds like AI weaves through a lot of the sort of developments and excitements that's going on in this industry. What do you think are some trends or outlets that you anticipate looking ahead for you?
I think a lot of these efficiencies will become standard practice, and that's what we want. Healthcare traditionally has been one of the most antiquated and fragmented industries in the world, right? It wasn't too long ago, if you remember, people had most of their medical records on charts and papers and files. So because of, hesitancy through secrecy or, a patient, records, confidentiality and whatnot. So now that things are becoming more digitized, more integrated, we're going to have the ability to leverage that fragmented data. And I can't wait till we have a world where we can leverage all of that data, not across just indications, but across countries, across hospital systems, across, there's so much interoperability issues right now. We have one NHS trust that can't even talk to another's because of their operating system is entirely different. Mm-hmm. Imagine the power of having an NHS that's unified with electronic records and diagnoses, so that when you move between one or the other, you could see commonalities. You can leverage all those indications for the betterment of the population. You can actually forecast where things are going, where viruses are spreading, where populations are being more affected by one thing, whether it's environmental or genetic. I don't know if I ran on there, but there's a lot.
No, that was great. I think you've given us a lot to think about. Gus, do you have any last comments or questions?
Yeah, I think one of the things that most people will ask, or most people see from this, is the such a deep focus that you have and such a sector expertise. Does that preclude your offices looking at other areas? Is that a shut door, or do you look at things that you're like, okay, I might not understand that, but that family office is an expert in?
I'm smiling because we do have, I'd be laughing if I didn't say that was not true. We do have some assets in other areas. They're just not a very large part of the portfolio. We have some investments in mobility. Right now, we're a shareholder of the largest Korean robotaxi company in the country. So very much dichotomous to healthcare, but we do have a position in that. We invariably, because I've been in the family office for 15 years, I know a lot of family offices focus on healthcare, but that's not their only investment thesis. So I'm a humble learner, and I'm always sitting with my contemporaries trying to learn, and they're always telling me about the other investments they're involved in. Yeah. So I'm always happy to put one family office together with another that might have an investment thesis outside my own expertise or my own focus or my own mandate. So things like that do happen.
Outside of healthcare, just one last question there. Outside of healthcare, what interests you the most from an investment perspective?
Oh,
I know, scary question.
Hard question. I've been so healthcare focused for 30 years, and maybe this is a flippant way to answer this, but look, most of my family, as I mentioned, got wiped out by all these diseases and whatnot. So there is so much to unpack in healthcare. It's every day is something new.
I'm going to say I like the focus because so many people are. We ask every family office that joins AU, we say, very privately, share your appetites. We want
Yeah.
to see where we can help. And most people have a spectrum. Some, but very, very people have such a laser focus, basically. So that's really, really interesting, and that's kind of exciting thing to work with. Especially, you know why? When we know someone isn't interested in something, it's just so much easier.
Yeah.
Just bang, 100%.
What's the old saying?
us
I'd
know.
rather a fast no than a slow dial.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Super powerful, fast nose. I mean, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. No, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I think our listeners will be very probably wanting to follow up with a lot of questions. And
No, look, this is the
pick
surface.
your brain.
Yeah, scratch the surface. There's so much we can go on here from every single one of these points. I think that the biggest thing you should take away from this is that these technologies are now democratizing healthcare. And all of these investments are making it so that it's no longer a question of where you live decides how and if you live. Because these technologies you can use remotely, you can use anywhere. We have oncology tests that you can take home and send off now for results for cancer diagnosis. Who would have ever thought that was a possibility 5 years ago? Look where we are now.
Incredible stuff. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Okay, so wow, as we said in intro, super focused, laser focused stuff from Everett. And again, every family office conversation you have, you learn something new.
Definitely. I think the idea of, blending philanthropy, impact, and looking from a legacy perspective is interesting, but also just hearing about the developments and how AI is really going to help sort of transform
Yeah, it's huge opportunity
this
across
industry.
across that space. And there's clearly a private network of family offices around the world inside the family office networks where there's significant expertise. So yeah, I'm excited to see what we can do there with AU, and I'm bringing our family offices into Everett's projects. And it's a global industry. It really is hyper connected. So really exciting, and a massive thanks to Everett for giving us the time.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
See you next time, guys.
For family offices, increasing allocations to alternatives also comes with more tedious tasks required to manage portfolios. Are these manual operational workflows slowing you down? This episode of the AYU Family Office podcast is brought to you by Canoe Intelligence. Born within a family office, Canoe uses AI and machine learning to automate manual workflows and transform how you manage your alternative investment data. Automate your document collection and data extraction process to turn tedious tasks into your strategic advantage, delivering precise outcomes and actionable insights to manage your alts smarter with Canoe. Over 200 family offices utilize Canoe to help improve efficiencies, scale their alts, portfolios, and future-proof the family office. Find out how in the podcast description or visit canoeintelligence.com/AYU.